What's going on, everybody, and welcome to another of my episode. And on this one, I'm going to talk more about what's going on in El Salvador, the gang crackdown, the state of emergency that they're in, and also some accusations by some investigation that was done on Bukele, and I don't want to say even in 2015. So I came across that, and that's what I'm going to speak about all of that. I just wanted to see if any other information might have popped up or anything that revolved around what I was reading or looking into. But let me start off by saying this. Bukele has extended the state of emergency many times. I want to say, well, his country's been in a state of emergency for the past 2.5 years. And what's going on in El Salvador, I spoke this on my last video, is that the people in El Salvador are in desperate need of help with the gangs that are over there and how the gangs actually rule over them. And there's articles that were coming across that said that Bukele was targeting or victimizing poor neighborhoods. Right off the bat, I was just like, okay, well, I would assume that all the gang members would be in the poor neighborhoods where they can take control of. I don't think he's actually victimizing poor neighborhoods. So just the wording of it kind of like, I don't know, I threw me off a little. I was just like, why are they trying to making it seem like he's victimizing poor people, period? There was actual citizens that were talking about how they're happier, how they're safer, how they're actually able to run a business and live a life without so much gangs and violence and being extorted or victimized or their kids being recruited to their gangs. So Bukele has extended the state of emergency every 30 days. He extends it. And the police officers and the troops are in the streets just pulling over anybody and their mama that are suspect or have just a slightly hunch that they might be gang affiliated or criminals. They cuff them up, they put them in prison, and they just go through the process in there. So that's where the basic human rights violation starts coming in and what they're talking about. State of emergency, as we know, is just a period of time of power that someone would not normally have on a daily basis. So by putting his country in the state of emergency, gives him that power to waive certain rights and just proceed with his agenda. And that's what's going on. They are going into people's houses, having them take off their clothes to see if they got any visible tattoos. People can actually call in and say, hey, my neighbor or this person is gang affiliated. That's all they got to say, and the police authorities will just come and grab them and put them through the process in prison. I wanted to know more about the details in prison, the conditions. Even though I did speak a little bit about it on my last video, I just wanted to get more into it because they did release about 8,000 innocent people after they went through the whole process, but they were there for more than a year. So they have stories to tell. And there's one specific story that this guy talks about. He was arrested on his way back from work. Say that he was a gang affiliated. The guy said no. He said, you have no rights. You're in the state of emergency. Cuffed him up and took him. His family didn't get to see him or hear about him for over a year. Now that he got out and was proven his innocence, he did talk about the conditions in that prison. And he said that when they were waiting to get their heads shaved on a line and going to one of the chairs to get their head shaved, they were getting beat up by guards. So the guards were lined up alongside them and just beating them up. So they got to their seat, shaved their heads, and on the way out, another good beating. He said by the time he got to his cell, he just laid there on the floor until somebody came and wanted to see if he was alive, because he did not notice that there was actually a puddle of blood forming around his head. But he realized that from that beating, he had couple cuts on his head, his eyes. He was pretty beat up pretty bad. And he said not only are the guards abusive towards them, but the prisoners themselves. That there was a time where they actually poured a bag full of piss on his head just to mistreat him, and that was the prisoners, he said, in the cell that he was in. He said that the actual gang members in there are the ones that are actually being more abusive inside their cells, and the people that are not affiliated, that just are there because they got snatched up on the raids, are the ones that are taking the abuse. He also said that, yeah, people have died in those prisons because of malnourished and the beatings that the guards are giving them, and as well the prisoners. So we obviously had an idea that, things like that are a big possibility. So the more I kept reading, there was an article that popped up about allegations of Bukele's corruption and his pact with the gang leaders in Salvador. So that kind of caught my interest, so that did catch my interest. I'm like, okay, well, what is this about? I don't know anything about this. I was living under a rock, so I have no clue what's going on about this. And if it was news, I don't think it was news enough to catch my attention. But Bukele has been under actual investigation since 2019 about this pact that he has with gang leaders. So what is this pact that he had with gang leaders? Well, for one, Bukele was actually mayor of San Salvador in 2015, through all the way to 2018, 19. That's when he became a president. But since 2015, he was involved in politics, and it's during that time that the crime rate actually started declining, and that's during the time that the investigations were able to pull up that his administration, there's two main people. One, his name, I believe, was, there's some weird last names, Moroquin, I think. And the other one was Luna. So those two people that are part of his administration have been documented, and they're actually signatures, videos of them contacting and having meetings with these gang leaders. There's a task force in El Salvador, and it's called Volcano Task Force, and it's part of the FBI and the DEA here in the United States. So when they started investigating this, they did see that the pact that they had, that Bukele's administration, and they're accusing that Bukele actually was the one that was directing those two guys to go and make these deals with these gang leaders, was the gang leaders would order their people not to alive so many people. And in return, what they would get would be free range of the prison, economic help, and better conditions for the gang members outside the streets, and the help of not being extradited to the United States to face charges over there. So this was all going on in 2015, allegedly. It's all reported. Or you guys can go ahead and read it yourself if you look it up. And in my last video, I actually showed a picture of the downtrend of the murders. It was around that time of the investigation. And when this trend was going down on the murders, Bukele was actually campaigning that he was gonna bring down gangs. That was his whole campaign ran on that. And he was elected in 2019. That's what helped him get elected, because he was already the mayor. Because supposedly of his efforts, gang violence was going down, which he used that, allegedly, he used that for his campaign to become presidency. Now there's 3 MS gang leaders that were illegally released. It's reported that they were illegally released by Bukele, being part of the pact that they had. All 3 of those leaders have been arrested and are being prosecuted, or have been prosecuted in New York for terrorism acts. I believe that's what it was. I don't know if there's any more details to that, but that's what it said. And in one of the cases, there's this guy named Rafa, and he actually dragged along the administration of Bukele that he was going to help capture another gang leader by the name of Crook. Because the investigation that they were running on Bukele ended up finding that Bukele actually released this guy named Crook. So there's text messages and recording where this guy Rafa had exchanged with Bukele's administration. Those two guys that I mentioned, Luna and Monique or some weird last name, dude. So these text messages in this recording are the way El Furio or Furia, the way that this Spanish news reported the text messages and the recording was that Rafa told Bukele's administration, the two guys that he was dealing with, he told them, I would help you capture Crook. I have connections with the Jalisco of Nueva Generación cartel. They're willing to get this guy for you for a small price, which he came up with a number of $1 million. And he also said, and for my help, I want an exchange for my sister to be released from prison. That guy's sister was incarcerated during the roundup of crackdown on gang members. It was complied. They released his sister. I'm not sure about the money, to be honest with you. It didn't talk much about the money, just said how supposedly the money was going to be divided between the cartels, him, and other associates that were supposed to catch this guy Crook. But Rafa, the whole time, all he wanted was his sister out and never delivered on his promise. So all of this is actually on record. And Washington actually was going to prosecute Luna and I can't even pronounce the other guy's name, but I'll put it up there for you guys. Washington was actually going to prosecute them. And this was towards the beginning of the Biden administration, 2019, I want to say. That's when Bukele got in office as well. Well, these guys were never charged or arrested. This whole case just went away, pretty much. Bukele now is president and he has Salvador under the state of emergency. So I found that very interesting that this was going on, and it kind of, I'm an amateur at this, but it kind of aligns to the decline in crime rates in Salvador. But that can be just a coincidence. It's just new information that I didn't even know. I had no clue that this was even going on. Now, knowing this information, and I believe also the citizens in Salvador caught wind of this information as well while all of this was happening. And I think if the crime in Salvador is so bad, the people in El Salvador are very tired of what's going on there, and just the abuse from the gangs, the extortion from the gangs, the murders, their kids being recruited to the gangs, even though they don't want to. I think even them knowing what Bukele or the allegations that they had against Bukele and what the pact that he had with gangs, I think the citizens, when they saw that and started coming into light about all that, they were so tired of that life that they were willing to overlook this whole pact that supposedly, allegedly, that Bukele had with the gang leaders. You fast forward to what it is today, streets are pretty clean from any gang violence, from any gang members. I'm pretty sure there's some that are living like rats, just hiding in any hole they can so they won't get captured. Bukele has also stated that he wants to call off state of emergency when it's safe. And he's being criticized of, well, when is it safe? Or is it just wants to have full control? Like I said, it's a better suite for the citizens there. There's a lot of citizens that applaud him. There's a lot of citizens that agree with him. There are a lot of citizens that are for it, and they do not mind what's going on in Salvador because now they're actually living a life without having to witness crimes, having to be victimized. And then there's families that were impacted by this roundup. And there was actually a mother that was impacted by the gang crackdown, and her son is still in prison, and her son is not a gang affiliated or has anything to do with gangs at all or crime. She said, I miss my son. Yeah, she stated that although it saddens that her son is in there, and that she wants her son back. She also stated that it is actually nice to be able to walk out of your house with no fear of being victimized, with no fear of the gangs that were roaming the streets. So even though she is suffering because of her son is in prison, hasn't heard from him in a while, she still is stating that she's happy of how the country is, that she feels safer now. So that's a lot with the citizens. And for the citizens to overlook what Bukele did or didn't do, or allegedly he was going on, for them to overlook that, I think that tells you how fed up the people in El Salvador were with these gangs. How tired they were of being victimized, extorted, their kids being recruited without even them wanting to. That just tells you that they were just tired and ready for a new change. And Bukele did that, either by doing the pact with the gang leaders or enforcing state of emergency and pushing the agenda of no more tolerance to these gangs, and let's get this cancer out of here for good. It's pretty interesting. What you guys think? Let me know.